We also have the star of Littlewood, Tessa Thompson. And moderating our discussion, we have Sashir Zameda.
Thanks for coming, guys.
Hi, everyone. Why? Sorry.
I'm so far from everyone. I'm just gonna come closer.
Honestly, yeah, I'm just on the stage for all this. Hi, guys. Yeah, clap. I'm Sashir Zameda. I'm going to be moderating this. I'm going to ask Tessa and Nia some questions, and at the end, you guys can ask some questions. Only a couple, so make them good. And then that's it. Okay. Congrats, guys.
Thank you.
First time I watched this was last year, and I was so impressed with how detailed and how much character there was to this location in the story. And so when I watched it, I was like, oh, whoever wrote this must be from North Dakota or from a place like this. And so I was so surprised to learn that you grew up in New York City. What made you want to highlight a place like this?
Well, it started with me wanting to tell a story about women in a rural part of America. That was like very clear in my head when I first kind of came up with the idea for the story. And then this part of North Dakota kind of fell into my lap in a way, and it just was a really fascinating place. The fracking boom was happening there, which is kind of redrawing the oil map of the world, and I feel like the people who live there and who work there and service that industry are completely kind of extricated from the story, from that kind of macro story. So I really wanted to tell like that story, and also through the eyes of women, because I felt like that was also another aspect of it that wasn't seen as often, and especially not in like a movie or a TV show, etc. So yeah, that was sort of the impetus, was just sort of realizing all the stuff that was happening in this very specific place and wanting it to be from a woman's point of view.
How much influence did you get from the actual place when you went to go visit it? Like you wrote the script and then you went to go visit it. Like, how much more did you learn from the actual place that you saw?
I think more of the opioid epidemic kind of seeded into it, because not just pills, it's also like meth is a huge issue there. And everyone I talked to, either personally or knew someone personally who was dealing with addiction or the illegality around that issue. So I just knew it had to be like kind of prominent in the story, even if the movie wasn't like about that. So that was a big thing. And then also, like, I remember sending the script to people and they'd be like, is this the distant future or past? Like, what? Like, why don't they just do this or just do this? And then I went there and they were like, oh, interesting, it's much worse actually here. So actually babies are $20,000, you know? So it was good to get that perspective, because I was so worried about getting it wrong. And they were like, no, this is that times, you know, whatever.
Yeah, this movie, it feels like there's a lot of issues in this movie that are very now, like the opioid epidemic, restrictions on reproductive health, just so much, like lack of health care. But so it feels like this was written this year, but you wrote it during the Obama era.
Yeah.
What were you trying to say during that time about what our state of country was, and what has changed since you read the script?
So at the time, the Affordable Care Act was rolling out, and the thing emblazoned in the news was the war on women, and they're both talked about in such like political, like inhuman terms. It was so alienated from anyone's actual lived experience. The abortion access debate was roiling, and it was really ugly, and I just felt like no one was actually just talking about the people who actually have to live with the consequences of what's happening in DC. Because like I live in New York City, and like 3 states just banned abortion, but I won't have to deal with that because I live in New York City. And I live in not just a state that allows it, but a city where I can walk to a Planned Parenthood or to a hospital, and you don't have to worry about those sorts of things. So regardless of who was present, I knew that in the rural parts of America where access is limited, whether it's because of politics or because of just literal distance, that it was going to be important no matter who was, you know, sitting in the White House. But now it's sort of like this horrifyingly relevant thing, because literally a disaster is happening in a way that I think no one could have predicted. But in terms of Williston, Tessa and I went separate times. So like I went earlier on in the writing process, like 2015, and it was kind of coming out of the boom. They were trying to figure out how to use the people who are there to make the town itself better and to have more people stay and keep and raise their families there as opposed to coming in for the boom and leaving. But when you went, you said there were like condos, right, on Main Street?
Yeah, there were, because the boom happened and they built all these incredible structures and then it sort of dissipated. So there were all of these places that weren't, people weren't renting in the same way. But I think at the height of the boom, at one point, it was something crazy, like the male to female ratio was something like 10 to 2 or something.
2 or something.
No, it was like,
it was worse.
It was like 10 to 2 at the height of the boom. And I went really on some very like anthropological, I was like, I'm gonna research. And I stayed with a family, which I thought was safer actually, in their Airbnb, like in their home, and lived with them for like 4 days. And it was so wild because I heard at the height of the boom, it could be very frightening as a woman alone there, which I think is something that the film you get a sense of, even if we're not overtly talking about that, just the danger of being in a female body. But anyways, the woman that I was staying with, I was like, so tell me, like I hear it's been really dangerous for women, how do you feel walking around? She's like, I feel great. I go to Walmart, I feel great. And then like 30 minutes later, they cooked me dinner and we were hanging out. She was like, well, I got my gun on me all the time. And I was like, oh, right. She just always carries her gun in her handbag because at the Walmart that she spoke about, at the height of the boom, there were multiple women that had been raped in the parking lot of the Walmart, in the Walmart. And also just, it was the first time, I'm from Los Angeles. And obviously I also worked in Hollywood, so I'm accustomed to the feeling of being otherized, but I had never felt, I like hung out in little dive bars there. Just being a person of color is something that still is remarkable there. And at least Nia told me to like rent a pickup truck, which helped, so I didn't
But I also
show up
said,
places,
but I also said in Tioga, I was like, okay, we went to Tioga, there's a massive like Confederate flag. And it's North Dakota, so that doesn't mean anything about Southern pride. So I was like, don't get out of the car. Cut to, she's like, oh, I'm at this bar in Tioga.
They were so sweet. They were so nice.
It was great.
But they were definitely like, you're not from around here. And I would like sneak on my iPhone taking voice memos. But they were also, everyone was really sweet. They were very eager to tell their story and really, it was curious to them that we were trying to tell a story that was loosely based on, those towns. And I found like an incredible young woman that worked at a diner that actually reminded me so much of Lily James' character, and she just sat with me for hours and read all of my lines and just told me about her experience, and people were very, very generous. So we couldn't actually shoot there because the weather would have been too tricky, but it felt like between the time that you spent and the time that I spent, we got a real sense of the place.
I do want to touch on this character being like the one woman of color that we saw in the story. How important was it for you to cast an actor of color for this role? And also what was it like for you to portray a character like this as a woman of color?
I always knew the lead was going to be black, just because I'm black and I was like, more black ladies in movies. And that was just really important to me. All the black ladies were like, yeah. And the allies as well. But I just knew that was going to happen, and it was just important to me. And then I met Tessa, and I was like, oh, this is the black woman who will be the lead of this story. It was really important to me, but it wasn't something that I thought about like I had to fight for. It was just something that was. And then thankfully, like by the time we came to like trying to fundraise, it wasn't like Tessa. It wasn't like, capital T, Tessa Thompson. So it was easy.
Cool. No, it's funny. I didn't really think about, because Nia and I met workshopping the piece basically, and then the third. I still think it's the third day.
I think it's the fifth day.
You think it was the fifth? Okay. Either the third or the fifth day meeting each other, she's like, let's make this movie together, and I was like, gladly. But I hadn't thought about any of the optics or whatever. I'm just in the skin, and she looks like she looks, and we're just gonna make a movie together. But I guess when we were making the film, I realized something remarkable was just playing a character that was at the center of a narrative, which I've been working for over a decade, and I can count on one hand the amount of times where that's been the case. And you know, like our film draws comparisons to other films that have young, very talented white women at the forefront, and it's not remarkable to them to be at the center of a narrative because they get to do it a lot. So I think in that way, when I was making the film, it occurred to me that this is something special, and the truth is, I've never been the center of a narrative where a person of color is not at the helm, and that's just happens to be the case. So I think there's something obviously special about that, because I want to see, if not myself, I want to see someone like me on screen in that way, and she has a vested interest in seeing that too, because we both are of color, so it makes sense to me. And obviously I hope we can get to a space where those stories are less noteworthy because they're just more normalized, but I feel like so grateful to you, Nia. I'm grateful for the experience.
Aww. What was it like working with Nia?
Well, to be honest, Nia asked me, so that either third or fifth day, she asked me to make the movie. We were drinking. I drink.
I was like, I'm gonna drink.
We like to drink together. No, it just feels, honestly, it feels like making a thing with a very good friend. So that's it. Yeah, it's cool. I mean, she's like very decisive, and I think maybe because this was her first film, although I hope she never loses this, she's really good at coming in and being like, okay, that was fine. Do it again, maybe this way. And then also I feel like I could say to her, like, this could be better, and there's no ego about it. So it just feels like making something with someone that you're very close to and that you're very safe with. And for me, I think that makes a collaboration that's fruitful.
That's great.
Yeah. Oh yeah, 100%. It was really, great to work with Tessa on this. But a lot of it is like feeling like you're working with a really great friend, and but also just from a craft point of view, like it makes my life a lot easier when, like, this is my first time making a feature. This is Tessa's, like, I don't know, like 12th or 13th, I don't know, probably a lot more. 50th. Anyway, the point is 82nd time making a feature film. But the point is, like, I knew, like, that there was why I wouldn't know. And because of her talent and intelligence, it was just great to have an ally to care as much as I did about making this movie really great. So when it was like, oh, this line doesn't make sense actually, instead of, I would freak out initially. I'm like, oh my god, I have to write the scene, and then it was like, no, actually I could just say this. I'm like, oh my god, okay, great. You know, like those moments are really useful, and so yeah, it was great. I had such a great time.
People have called this film a modern Western.
Mm-hmm.
Would you agree with that description?
Yeah, I like that a lot. I mean, I think if you're being like super like strict about it, it's like a drama. It's a drama about two sisters. But I purposefully drew on Western elements and themes from the Western genre, in part because like this is a modern like, gold rush town. It's an open town, and a lot of this movie is about being in the space between lawlessness and society, and what happens to those people who have to exist in that space and the choices they have to make because they exist in that space. And that's a very prevalent theme in Westerns, and I just love Westerns, so I really enjoyed sort of taking Tessa's character and making her into an archetype, like a sort of Western archetype, like the lone gunslinger who has to put down their guns, but there's one person who can convince them to pick them back up, you know? Yeah. I think that was really compelling to me as well.
There, at the center, amidst all the issues that are being covered in this movie, at the center is this rich sisterhood. Did you draw upon personal relationships for that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. First time I answered this question was the Tribeca Q&A. My sister was in the audience, and I was like, yes. However, since she's not here, no, I absolutely did. My sister and I have had a period of estrangement, which I actually didn't even think about when I was writing this, because that's how my brain works. I'm like, this isn't about me at all. But yeah, I mean, I find the relationship is so complicated and full of love, and my sister in particular are so different. Like, I'm like a doer, she's not really in the same way. So like when I try to like help, you know, there's like a problem, she's like, there's no problem, don't help me. And then if I'm like, I stand back, it's like, why have you abandoned me, you know? So it's like that sort of like really fun and complicated, but like also loving relationship is sort of what I drew on emotionally, I think, for this. Yeah.
Were you able to draw upon any personal experiences for your performance?
Yeah, I got a lot of sisters.
Yeah.
So I know about it. You said something so smart in here recently, which was this idea of like that you used to think when people said write what you know, it meant like write what you literally know.
Yeah.
And then you realized it was write what you know emotionally, which is cool. And then it turns out you probably do that without knowing it, right? Yeah, I have sisters, so and also just this idea of like, because obviously like Ollie and Deb in the movie are adopted sisters. All of my siblings are technically half siblings, and my family is oriented in a unique way. And also I feel like I have relationships with women in particular that feel like they're my sisters, Nia included. So this idea of like chosen family, and I think something that really struck me about this film, the way that Nia conceived it, is this idea of having to choose family again. Because I think sometimes as adults you can become estranged from your loved ones, and you have to sort of make the choice to re-engage in those relationships and have them matter to you and occupy a big part of your life. And that's something that I've definitely had to do inside of even my family dynamics. So I loved that.
For both of you, what is something you want audiences to take from watching this movie?
I say this all the time, but it's honestly like the only answer. It's just that empathy and that kind of increased ability to connect with people unlike ourselves. I think that's really important. So that's how we're gonna get through this. So yeah, that's the main thing.
To take from this, I don't know. I'm really thanks for being here to all of you. I mean that sincerely. I think we're like. Yeah, clap for yourself. I think we're at a time of talking a lot about it really robustly and seriously about representation inside of Hollywood and what we need to see and new sorts of stories and stories that have been often maligned inside of Hollywood. And it's really important then to support those stories. The only way that they continue to get told is by buying tickets, real talk. So I really appreciate you doing that. And I guess what I want people to take from that is that we should just do more of that. We should invest in those stories. We should go and see them. We should make them. If there are people out there that are filmmakers, that are storytellers, we should make them because people will show up. So I think that's what I'm excited about. Yeah.
Great. All right, I will open it to the audience now. Are there any questions? Great. I don't think we have mics out, so just project, please.
Hi, I'm Kirby. I was really curious about the way that you went about your directing process, and especially working with the actors in rehearsal, both on the set and off the set.
Oh man, directing. So I'm like in the midst of sort of doing it right now because I'm prepping a movie. But from what I remember, it's basically just been me. When it comes to department heads, it's being super specific about everything. I like to make decks. And just like, here are all the colors I want. Here's all this I want. Here's this and that. And just being, because like, my job is to basically make choices. And I should probably know what those choices are or have an idea about them. In terms of working with actors though, which is kind of probably one of like the top 5 favorite things about directing. First step, like just casting really amazing actors, really smart actors. It makes my life a lot easier and it's just better work gets done. I'm really collaborative. I like rehearsal a lot. We didn't have a ton of time for rehearsal, but I feel like in that space, a lot of things come up and things get better. I don't know, actually. I don't know what else. Can you comment on my directing?
Yes, I can. What'd you do? You are very. My favorite thing, Nia, is that you come up and you're like, yeah, like that for a really long time, and then you say something that's really piercing and honest and true. I think something that Nia does that I really like is when she praises you, you know that she means it because she's continuously in the process of trying to mine it and go deeper and figure it out. Which means that you don't coddle egos. That's good because they're not that tight anyways. And we rehearsed some, we talked. I think we really just talked
Yeah.
and hung out. And I think just creating a really safe space. Like, I think you're right in terms of, and I feel like every director that I've worked with, it says the same thing that you've said in terms of casting the right people means that once they do, they just trust them a lot. So I just always felt like she really trusted me and like I could do no wrong. She let me ad-lib so much in the script, and the script is so beautiful and really taut, but she would call it jazz riff on top of her beautiful words.
I love jazz.
Yeah, and I think just like creating an environment where there's a democracy of ideas and the best idea wins and it doesn't matter who has it. And all the best people I've ever worked with are that way, so.
In the back there.
Hi.
Hi.
Thank you for the movie. It was amazing.
Thank you.
What was something difficult that came up for you during the process, either during, or post, and how did you get through it?
All of prep is terrible, and I got through it because my producers, Rachel and Gabrielle were amazing, and I had really great EP support as well. I mean, the shoot was tough. I mean, honestly, like, the first week was rough. I remember, like, Tessa was sort of like the guinea pig for our production because there was crazy things happening. And we were oh, good. I mean, there was a thunderstorm the first day. We shot at this trailer park, which was like so dark.
Oh,
And it was like,
There's a
cute dog, which was adopted by one producer. It was like, there was just like these barefoot children and stray dogs running around so early in the morning. It was like so dark. We're like, oh my god. But like because like also Luke Kirby was there that week, and it's just I felt really supported because of you guys. But it was it was crazy. We shot this for under $1 million. We really I needed twice as much money, but people really came together. I think because it felt like a kind of family, we were able to get through it. But it was tough. Fundraising's hard. Everything is hard. But it was fun. I had so much fun on this movie though. I had so much fun.
And there was really good barbecue.
Oh my gosh. We shot in Texas for the most part. And we had 2 days in North Dakota. I mean, unreal.
Cool. How about you right here?
Hi. How many days did you shoot?
25?
Yes.
First, I just want to say congratulations. You did what most filmmakers want, to make their first feature and hit it out the park. You hit it out the park.
Thank you.
I'm excited. My question is, what piece of advice would you give to the filmmakers trying to make the leap into a feature?
This is such a hard question because I went the route of like film school and I have so much debt, and so I can't really like ethically tell someone to do that. But I had a great time and I got a master's and that was great too, and I did Nuart Theatre. The thing that actually got me through like the before making a movie kind of moments was I write. So writing I can do by myself. I don't need anyone else for that. And I had to put myself into a state where that was enough because at the end of the day, the work has to be enough, period. Like, and all of this other stuff is amazing, but like, there's no guarantee that it will come. So that's the biggest thing. And then finding a way to make work. Like I call like a working class filmmaker, or was until I became successful. But that's good. But like when I couldn't like pay my rent, when I was like editing this film, and my friends were like would pay my rent for a month or whatever. Like you just have to like be able to figure out ways to still make stuff. I found filmmaking prohibitively expensive for a very long time, like pretty much up until other people gave me money to make this movie. And I think people don't talk about that a lot, and that's part of the barrier to access for people who aren't rich, who aren't well off, et cetera, et cetera. But finding ways to and finding a community of filmmakers, they're gonna like get you through it.
Thank you.
I'm low-key bummed you never asked me to pay your rent.
Oh my god, I should know
All right, we'll take one more. How about directly in the back, in the middle?
Is there any significance to the title apart from the town?
No. Little Woods doesn't exist in North Dakota. I didn't want to libel anyone, so I had to come up with a fake town. It's not fake though. There's a Little Woods in Mississippi. It's a very dark place. Lots of crime. So I get news alerts that are like, man shot. And I was like, oh no, that's not my Little Woods. But no, there was significance besides the fact that I just wanted it. Like, actually, here's what I will say. The very first draft of the script had a lot more of just like town stuff, a lot more characters, a lot more. aspects of the town that you would see, because I was like, this is about the town. But then I realized actually it's about these sisters, so I was able to like hone it down. But that's sort of where Little Woods comes from.
Cool. Well, thank you everyone for coming.
Thanks so much.